Hi, I'm Suri Krishnamma, and I have been asked by Park Circus Films to give you a selection of my favourite films from their catalogue. Before I give you that selection, I should mention one of my own that they have that I'm particularly proud of. Do check it out. It's called A Man of No Importance. But modesty prevents me from including it in this particular selection. What I've chosen is, to begin with, Blue Velvet, David Lynch's extraordinary story that looks at the ugly side, perhaps, of small-town America. I think what Lynch manages to achieve in this film is similar to what Louis Buñuel, maybe his surrealist filmmaking predecessor, achieved in some of his work. Buñuel, the Spanish director who looked at the ugly side of the upper classes and their animalistic at times attitudes. So David Lynch looks at the kind of underbelly of small-town America. It's a masterpiece of a movie, I think, in many respects. It's a film that I went to see 5 times in its first week of release. So captivated by it I was, and also so kind of drawn to the idea that if you were in a particular mood, you may see a different film. At times I watch it and think it's a comedy. At times I watch it and think it's a horror film, terrifying. At times I watch it and I'm simply mesmerised by exquisite performances, particularly by Dennis Hopper and Carl MacLachlan, with outstanding performances also from Laura Dern and Isabella Rossellini. But it's also a really good detective story. If you wanted a story, basically, that follows a guy who stumbles across a severed ear one day and takes it to the police and hands it in and decides to take up his own investigation, and through that the plot unfolds, and you watch it as a straightforward detective story. It's also very well crafted. So that's the first in my selection. The second in my selection is also a David Lynch film, Elephant Man. Elephant Man is photographed in beautiful black and white by Freddie Francis. Exquisite performance from John Hurt as the Elephant Man, but includes also some terrific British acting talent and American. Anne Bancroft, Michael Elphick, John Hurt, as I've mentioned, and many others. It's a film that captures the real kind of tragedy inside a man's horrific physical deformity, but achieves something remarkable in presenting that deformity as something quite beautiful. It's a film about honesty. There's a sequence in the film that I'm particularly drawn to, in which the Elephant Man asks Freddie Treves, the doctor, whether he can cure him, and the doctor replies, after a pause, "No, I can't." And the Elephant Man turns and says, "I thought not." So it's a film where honesty is a central theme, and it's a very honest film in that regard. There are some memorable moments in the film. In particular, it's really beautiful denouement, and it's kind of poetic, lyrical soundtrack that accompanies the very strong imagery created by Freddie Francis. So Elephant Man is my second choice. Third on the list would be Citizen Kane. I've included Citizen Kane unapologetically. I say that because I think over the years it's been given quite a few knocks by people who want to rip it from its mantle, its pedestal of being, the greatest film ever made. I think because it's adopted that moniker, it's been open to far more attacks than it really deserves. It is a masterpiece. It's Orson Welles' masterpiece. It's a film he wrote, produced, directed, and starred in. It revolutionised filmmaking, I think, and particularly in America, creative structures for filmmakers to follow, non-linear structures, where the narrative is fragmented. And I think, if for no other reason than that, it's a groundbreaking piece of work, but it's also a really enjoyable study of a man, in which you would build up a sense of this person from a number of different points of view for people who knew him in different ways. There's one sequence in it which I mentioned, which is the wedding sequence between him and his first wife, where he and his wife go through the journey from being passionately in love to the horrible distance that falls on their marriage as a consequence of the many years they are together and not being suited. And the sequence is played out across a breakfast table where you whip pan from the first breakfast moment between them where they're happy to the next moment later on where they are rather less than happy, to a third and fourth and final moment, I think, in which they're now no longer talking. And this sequence is played out over just a couple of minutes, but tells you the entire story of the marriage. So it's a terrific film, and I recommend it really unapologetically, as I say. The fourth film on my list is Pan's Labyrinth, Guillermo del Toro's masterpiece. This film came out a few years ago, and I think Mark Kermode, the reviewer, described this film as being not just as good as Citizen Kane, but it was Citizen Kane in his view in terms of its importance to world cinema. And I think he's right. I think why this film is so extraordinary is not just its fantastic visual effects and creative ideas and design and portrayal of mythical, magical characters alongside naturalistic characters. But really for me it's the way that it takes those two very distinct genres and blends them into one, conflates them into one seamless vision. And I think the way it does that, for me, that stands out more than any other approach that Del Toro makes, is that he creates a kind of realism inside the fantasy figures and a kind of fantastical, slightly heightened, more theatrical characteristic in the naturalistic characters. So in other words, the soldiers and the civilians that populate the naturalistic world are dressed often in costumes which are slightly too theatrical for what you would expect from that type of story set in the war. And the mythical, magical characters and creatures out of Del Toro's imagination are given much more human characteristics. So I think for that reason it's a beautiful blend of two genres and exquisitely executed. So it's fourth on my list. Fifth on my list is a social realist film, Lady Bird, Lady Bird. And this film, directed by Ken Loach, tells the story of a woman who tragically found herself in a position where she was accused of neglect of two of her children that were then taken into care through a very simple, small mistake that she makes. And as a consequence of that one single mistake, her life is torn apart. The film itself is beautifully written and creates a kind of very real, naturalistic world. But I think what it achieves more than anything else is to really focus on fallible characters who, really weakened by their circumstances and particularly their economic necessity, make mistakes and suffer the horrific consequences of a society that would judge them far more severely because of their poverty than they would have done had they been advantaged by money. I saw this film at BAFTA years ago. I remember it vividly. I remember leaving the cinema, and I remember a moment as I walked away thinking of the heartbreak that this film presents, and my legs gave way and I had to grab hold of the railings next to the road at Piccadilly. I was so moved and maybe angered as well by what I'd seen. It's a film that can motivate you to action and make you feel that you should also make your own contribution to trying to right the injustices in society. So that's Lady Bird, Lady Bird. So that's my selection. Blue Velvet, Elephant Man, Citizen Kane, Pan's Labyrinth, Lady Bird, Lady Bird. Beautiful films. I hope you enjoy them. They're an eclectic bunch. If you think about them a little bit more deeply, you'll probably realise there is a link there is a connection between these. Maybe it's to do with power, but they're themes that excite and interest me and have done over the years, and these are films that I will watch repeatedly, and I hope if you get a chance, if you haven't seen them, you'll also enjoy. Thank you very much, and thank you Park Circus for giving this opportunity for me to share my favourite films from your collection.